Do you remember these? Who doesn't? Our residences probably still have tons of these packed in different cubicles and corners and shelves. But it was such a profound memory for us as a community and for the world as well. I remember it was 2020. It was in February, I think it was middle February. I had been in Sudan, South Sudan, for a number of weeks, and I had come out, and all of the COVID stuff that had been going on, we were in South Sudan, so we weren't in touch with any news agency or anything else. We didn't know what was going on. You basically have to use satellite phones there. So I didn't know anything about it. So we came out to Uganda and we were in the airport and we saw all of these people moving through the airport, all of them with masks on. So our team looked at what's going on, and then we looked at it on the TV. And on the TV, they started showing these different places around the world, but the language wasn't English. So we couldn't quite figure out all what was going on. It wasn't until we got on the plane that we discovered that there was a global pandemic beginning that had its origins in China, but which was quickly moving its way throughout the world. Um, by the time we arrived back in Toronto and got filled in on all what was going on, we knew that trouble was coming. You would have got all that in real time, but we found out about it after we got home. I wanted to do a series about the pandemic. And the reason is it was global in scope. It was massive. We know that millions of people died from it. We know it was politically turbulent. We know that all countries handled it differently. But for us as a food bank, the pandemic, those 2 years of the pandemic, were some of the most formative we have ever been through in our 40 years. Now, I mean that. I mean, it caused us to change everything just as it did in society. And that's a really important point. When you're a food bank and you're trying to help as many people as we did back then and we continue to do today, you've got to make sure your operations keep running. Even though we were all confused and we didn't know quite what we were all supposed to do, all of society was in that position. It was hard. And then I remember we were asked by a number of leaders, of London leaders, to come to a meeting, and they wanted to know if the food bank was going to stay open during the pandemic. And Jane and I had talked about it, and we said we absolutely will. We have to. And they all kind of breathed a sigh of relief. They were thankful about that. They would have understood if we would have limited operations or closed down, as some food banks did. And we said no, we felt it was our job to be there for the community, but we were just as confused as everybody else. It was quite something. And then they said, well, we need the food bank to keep operating. And then they listed a number of agencies that we're going to have to either limit operations or shut down altogether. Don't forget, we were all trying to learn about it. This was in April and May of 2020. We're just getting our heads around it. There were all these kind of mixed messages and people weren't sure. But Jane and I were determined that we were going to keep it going. We talked to the board about it. We've got a great board. And they said, look, at you folks are the judges of that. You're going to have to run that. But if you feel that you can do it, yes, of course. We're a community resource and we have to keep operating in that way. So Jane and I sat down, and I want to talk to you about that because it's been a real challenge for just Jane and I. But back then, we made some really important decisions that have affected the food bank to this day. It changed our operations, it changed our focus, it changed how we functioned, but it also put the food bank in a unique position in the community in a time when everything was so constrained, and in a time when people were afraid to ride on a bus or be in public with other people. It was just, we didn't know. They were afraid to shop. They were having trouble getting certain grocery supplies from grocery stores because of supply chains and all that was going on. And Jane and I had to think a lot about how we were going to handle that and what we were going to do. What came out of that is what is the food bank today. What it was before that, it was a community staple. We were doing the best we could. We'd been around a long time. We'd helped a lot of agencies. But we weren't doing then what we are doing today. And the reason why I wanted to do a series on the pandemic is that everywhere I go, and I speak a lot, so does Jane, or we talk to different groups, they all feel that the world has changed since the pandemic and things are really much worse, much more difficult. Communities are having trouble getting up off the mat and getting on with their communal life and their economic life. All of that is 100% true. But I think that there were certain things that happened during the pandemic that were almost miraculous, in fact, mind-blowing. How things came together for us as a food bank during that time is a real message, not about the food bank, but about this community. They were looking for ways to respond and they didn't know how. But when the food bank came along and said we're staying open, we were suddenly swamped with volunteers and things really began to change. And we realized we had responsibilities to the outlying regions of London, to the massive homeless population that was growing during that time, also to our political leaders in the community. They didn't know what they were going to do about food. How do we help people who are hungry? Or, what about the agencies that can't afford to stay open because it's a difficult thing with them because of the medical emergency? I think Jane and I, we just had a talk on the weekend about it on Canada Day, and we were saying that that has become one of the pivotal times of our life, not only as a married couple, but as directors of the food bank. I want to go through some of that with you. There was some of it that's been a real challenge. That's absolutely true. But it's a sign of what communities can do, even in great times of hardship. And we know that. We know that from times of war. We know that from times of economic depression. We understand a lot of these things take place in life and in modern life, and communities have to develop ways of response and figuring it out. And we did, and the community did. And what came out of it has really made the food bank into what it is today. I think some really great things, some really important and vital things came out of it that are still in place today. So even though the times are tough, it's really prepared us for those times. And we are ready to go. And hopefully we don't have to go through this again. But the point is, we're more ready than we have ever been in our time as a food bank in 4 decades. Jane and I are pumped and ready to go with it, in spite of all of the challenges. But this series about the pandemic will actually be all about you. It'll be all about London, the associations, the faith groups, the service clubs, the businesses, large and small, and average citizens who just decided, you know what, this is a hard time, but we're going to make this community better. And they did, in the middle of all that darkness and all that confusion. I'm really looking forward to this next few series because it is about you, and it is about what you were able to accomplish during that time.